Chapter 3.
Where are we going?
Link was leading her away from their usual training area and toward the soldiers' barracks. She had an idea of their destination, somewhere in the Knights' barracks given the general direction, but she didn't really have a clue as to why.
Training.
She rolled her eyes.
Yes, you've said. To do what? Why aren't we going to the training yard?
You'll see in a minute.
She begrudgingly followed without asking any further prodding questions, disappointed to realize that they were going straight into the armory, likely for a lesson on the types of weapons stored there, which wasn't particularly her cup of tea. Link had been changing up his lessons each morning for the past week in an attempt to keep her interest. She appreciated his efforts, but it was painfully obvious that he was not a lecturer, and his previous training experiences had always been mundane routines and drills that never needed to be altered. So when they arrived to see 2 sets of armor dismantled and laid out in pieces on the floor, her interest was piqued.
Huh?
There were 3 knights standing at attention around the room, far more formal in their demeanor than Link. Zelda could tell that he'd begun to get accustomed to her, and his near-constant uncertainty of being in her presence had faded. Now, he treated her like any other woman about 75% of the time, while the other 25% had taken on the anxieties of her being the princess, bowing several times in a row unnecessarily when he did something wrong, refusing to contradict something she said that had no relevance to fighting. It still creeped up, but Zelda was sincerely relieved that he had loosened up. It made these training sessions far more tolerable. So when Link joined the other 3 knights in his stoic formal pose, hands folded behind his back, legs spread slightly, she narrowed her eyes. She'd seen her personal guard stand like this for hours, and she'd asked one of them that she knew well if that position was as uncomfortable as it looked. Her favorite guard, Julius, let her stand with him for a while outside her own door once, laughing at her sad attempts to ignore the burn in her legs after a while. She didn't understand the practicality of it. Their weapons weren't even at the ready. Curious, she turned to Link for an explanation of it all before her. Almost bashful, he shrugged.
It occurred to me after our conversation yesterday that it's unlikely you've ever seen your knights get ready. Nor do you know what it is that we wear or why. One day you'll likely be given your own armor before the calamity, if your father believes you may be in danger, and this would be valuable information for you.
Zelda hummed with a small smile on her lips, standing over all the pieces.
Interesting.
Zelda was not a fan of being spoken at, which she imagined was thanks to her father, but hands-on learning was a particularly favorite style of hers, and it seemed that Link might have picked up on it. She nearly rushed forward to grab a piece of the armor and examine it, only restraining herself through her practiced decorum. But there was an interesting piece near both the leg and neck she wanted to get a better look at, and her hand was itching for it. The room was bright, despite the stony gray appearance. Windows were opened for the sunlight, and candles burned for additional assistance. She turned to Link and crossed her arms.
What am I missing here? Why are we doing this, really?
I figured you may also need to see 2 knights practice, so you could get a better idea of how the Yiga might move.
Are you going to be playing the part of the Yiga?
He smirked at her.
I could, but I don't have the right clothing set out for that. It's much tighter to allow for better movement and stealth.
Zelda's cursed mind took over and her eyes ran over him, picturing Link in some skin-tight material expertly moving to take out a fully armored knight. Admittedly, it was a very appealing visual. She'd called him scrawny, but the more time she spent with him, the more she realized that wasn't true. He wasn't large by any means, not in height nor width. He was unassuming at best while he was sitting down in his uniform, which appeared too loose when he moved a certain way. But he'd had short sleeves on the other day, and his muscles flexed, revealing a carefully hidden and intimidatingly fit physique. And since then, she'd started to wonder more about what else he was hiding. The stealth suits of the Yiga and Sheikah had her mind racing. Still, the presence of others had her feigning disinterest.
What a pity. Perhaps another time.
Link bit back a grin and turned away just in time to hide the rush of color into his now burning ears. Present company or not, she knew he could hear the subtleties in her voice after 2 months with her. It was at this moment Link chose to change the topic and pointed to another knight, the oldest of the three.
This is Coil, among our absolute finest. You'll never find a more talented fighter.
Except for Link himself, Princess. You have a good instructor.
Link didn't say anything, only clearing his throat awkwardly as Zelda stared at him, waiting for his response.
Coil and I will be demonstrating. He is going to wear that armor.
He pointed at a larger set, wider, more plates.
I'll be in this one. So I'll show you how it goes on, and then another day when we find some your size, you can practice yourself, just in case the need arises. If it doesn't, well, you'll have had a break from running for the day at the very least.
Zelda smiled and leaned against a table that was jutting out in the middle of the room, used as a storage shelf from the looks of it. She nodded to Link.
What goes on first, then?
In a quick motion, Link pulled his overshirt off, revealing his longer-sleeved one underneath. Despite him seemingly becoming more covered up in the motion, Zelda couldn't help the rush of butterflies that had her folding her hands in front of her stomach in case they were noticeable. Which, of course, was a silly thought. For all his faults and annoyances, she was willing to admit to herself that she did enjoy looking at him far more than she had at the beginning. Truly, she'd seen nothing about him attractive, except perhaps the color of his eyes, in the slightest for the first month or so he'd trained her. And now, she so wished that he'd taken both layers off, if only for a second. Or at least let his second layer right up. Anything to make training more interesting, really. If Link was aware that she'd been studying him far too closely, he didn't show it. Instead, he grabbed a metal piece to fit over his boot, carefully lacing it into another piece, adding a buckle. Relaxing, she crossed her arms so she could rest her chin in her hand.
Why are you starting with your shoes?
Link glanced up, but grabbed the next piece to continue.
It'll be much more difficult to get them on once all the other armor is on. Not impossible, but why add more work for yourself?
Zelda asked a question for almost every piece of the boot. Why was it in so many pieces? Why was it sticking out so far? What would happen if he fell? Why was there a buckle and not laces? It took Link longer than usual to put it on, but he was pleasantly surprised to hear Zelda so engaged that he couldn't bring himself to go any faster. He'd worked his way up so there was armor covering his shins before he grabbed a doublet off the table and slid into it, lacing it up.
Goddess, you have so many layers.
2 right now. Not bad yet.
You must just sweat all day when you wear this.
Link chuckled to himself and shrugged.
It's nice in the winter, though, when there's no fighting.
He pulled chainmail over his head and hopped a bit to get it unfurled. Then, one of the other knights in the room who'd been quiet thus far stepped forward to assist Link with the large metal breastplate. Link was about to turn so she could see, but she was already on the move, standing beside the younger knight. She watched the careful attention that went into securing the armor to Link's body. Coil was almost done off to the side, but he'd had more help and hadn't been answering her every question.
Could you do this yourself if you needed to? Or is help required?
Swiveling his head so he could see her, he nodded.
I could. It would take much more time. That's why when I'm with you, I usually opt for just chainmail under my tunic, maybe a chest plate. It's faster and it's something I can do on my own. But if we get ready here or are going on a raid, there's other soldiers who know how to assist you while you assist someone else. It's far more efficient, and it's safer to go out in the full getup. You don't usually take this long either. Admittedly, I'm offering you a much slower look into the process.
Zelda snorted as she moved to the side to watch Link and the knight strap his arm gear before attaching a more protective royal pauldron onto each of his shoulders.
Imagine telling the goblins to hold their attack because of how long it takes to get armor on.
Link nodded.
They'd listen to you, wouldn't they?
Because of their big ears?
He laughed and fastened his gauntlets over his hands. His helmet remained untouched on the table.
Well, that, and because you're quite terrifying when you want to be, Princess.
Zelda grinned.
That I consider a success.
The whole process took far less time than Zelda imagined, though more time than she'd thought as well. She'd originally imagined that all this armor took about an hour to get into, yet at the same time, she pictured it as a 2-minute process, knights ready to move at a moment's notice. Coil had been long since done, and Zelda felt only slightly bad making him wait for Link as she sidetracked him every 2 seconds. But with them both in their gear, Zelda was practically bouncing. It was as if she were going to watch the sparring tournaments at the Colosseum. With how heavily armored they both were, it wasn't a stretch to believe that could have been exactly where they were going. And Zelda did love the Colosseum tournaments. Something about Link and Coil in full armor made Zelda stop though, and realize that she was actually training for something real. There was a fight coming, a threat that loomed over her head that she needed to be protected from. There would be a calamity, a war, a battle, and she would be at the center of it. The thought had her shuddering. But Coil and Link moved outside and into the center of the training yard, and almost on cue, the rest of the knights stopped what they were doing to stand around and watch. Some hung on the fence, their arms dangling over the wood, while others sat in the grass and leaned back to get comfortable. Almost for the first time in her life, Zelda wasn't the one that everyone's eyes were on, and she enjoyed the fact that she was out in a public area without being the subject of everyone's gawking. Instead, their eyes were on the 2 knights. She leaned against one of the sturdy support poles and crossed her arms to get comfortable. Maybe no one realized who she was, with her hair messy and tied out of her face, and her exercise gear on rather than her circlet or crown. One of the knights who'd helped Coil get ready stood beside her, and she hesitated, but figured that it was always worth it to ask a question, even if it was a dumb one.
Why is this a spectacle? Don't you all skirmish often?
The knight chuckled before stealing his expression.
We do, Princess, but these are the best 2 fighters in Hyrule. Age versus youth, experience on both sides. They don't fight often, but when they do, it's always a showcase.
Zelda watched with piqued interest. In theory, she knew Link was good. Her father had said he was one of the best, but without seeing it herself, it had always just been a story told to her. Now, seeing the entire garrison pour out to watch the skirmish, she realized everyone might have undersold his skill. They both pulled their helmets on and readied their swords before 2 other knights ran out to hand them their shields. Or perhaps squires, but she didn't think Link actually had one. Maybe that was just for tournaments. Perhaps they were just trainees. It looked like they were truly going into battle, Zelda thought. When the area was cleared, there was no hesitation before Link immediately struck out with his sword, an easy deflection on Coil's part from their distance. But Link knew that of the 2 of them, he was faster, and he made use of it whenever he could. Zelda's eyes widened at his speed. She knew he was quick. She could see it literally in the way he'd run each morning beside her, but also in more subtle moments when he wasn't paying attention. He'd swing his sword around almost absently, his hand a blur of movements. Or it was in the way he dodged her hand just in time when she'd floundered during one of the exercises and nearly fallen before he steadied her, and then proceeded to correct her poor form. She wondered if his perception and speed were linked as one skill, or simply both excellent. He relentlessly pounded at Coil's sword until the veteran staggered back and raised his shield to deflect and to finally push Link away. Link hopped back and wrung out his shoulders after the assault he'd just performed. He and Coil circled each other, assessing the other's movements with keen eyes. Coil moved in, feinting to get Link's shield out of the way so he could get closer, and he swung straight for Link's head. Again, an easy block, But this time, Zelda gasped and grabbed at the knight beside her.
Is that allowed?
It is for them. They know their limits. A new recruit would be in trouble for a move like that.
What if one of them gets hurt?
We have signals to stop a fight. Don't worry, Princess Zelda.
Clutching her arms tighter, she watched Link and Coil meet again and again, swapping between the offensive and defensive, between the heavy and fast swings, and between using their shields as battering rams or to block. It wasn't 3 minutes in that Coil elbowed Link in the face and he staggered backwards. Zelda didn't realize that she had held her breath until the burning gasp she took tore from her throat. Link being hurt wasn't actually something she'd considered. Despite knowing that a well-matched fight meant injuries on both sides would occur, or a stalemate, Link had been talked up to be practically invincible. Tense, Zelda watched Coil quickly press the advantage, but Link was faster, rolling away and raising his shield just in time to take the heavy strike that had been intended for him. The wooden shield splintered, and a second heavy blow from Coil's shield took the top half of Link's clean off.
He broke Link's shield! Is that allowed?
They may break in a real fight, and simulating true conditions is beneficial. So yes, Princess, it is allowed.
Link rolled again and tossed the scrap wood aside, wringing out his arm once more before taking full advantage of his now free second hand. With both hands, he slammed his sword down into Coil's and pinned the point to the dirt before throwing his weight down, bringing both Link's own body and Coil's shield down at once with so much force and momentum, it snapped the blade. Coil forced Link off him with a hard elbow to the mouth before he grabbed a second sword from his back, one that was bigger and heavier, and he tossed his shield aside. She'd been so distracted by their armor that she hadn't even noticed their weapons. That would be terrible in a real situation. Zelda felt her nails digging nervously into her skin. Blood was dripping from Link's mouth, but he was grinning as he circled Coil, almost like this had somehow been part of a great elaborate plan of his. With a quick motion, Link sprung into the air and thrust his sword out as hard as he could, leaving a long scratch in Coil's armor as he deflected only the very end of the move.
Could they kill each other by accident?
It's possible, of course, but they're both the best at what they do. I wouldn't worry.
In the same movement, Link rolled himself across Coil's bent back, striking at his unprotected side, leaving yet another long indent along the metal of the gauntlet. Coil recovered and aimed for Link's head, but Link parried and ducked under a second attempted blow with the pommel, leaving his back exposed. He moved quickly to push the incoming swings away from him as he tried to right himself, but there were too many in a row, and Link hit the ground with Coil's sword following. Rolling, Link moved away to catch Coil's wrist to redirect a strike, using the momentum to elbow the older man's face. The impact was staggering. Coil let out a frustrated cry and charged at Link, leaving Link to back up with precise movements, parrying each blow without tripping. He ducked under a swing and spun his sword into his free hand just in time to jab out with his empty one, straight into the gap of Coil's armor where his sword would have pierced straight through his stomach and out his back. Both men backed away, and Link stabbed the tip of his sword into the dirt. Coil tossed his helmet off to the side and tapped his face to check for blood, but when he was satisfied, he held his hand out to Link in defeat. Link shook it with Coil's proudly clasped hand on his shoulder as they walked back toward Zelda. Coil had no blood on him, but there was a bruise forming on his chin, and he was heaving for breath. Link, on the other hand, was bleeding from the mouth, his hair half out of his ponytail, tousled and wild. He was breathing hard, but not nearly to the extent of his opponent. He was grinning wildly as he laughed with Coil as they headed back toward Zelda. Pushing his hair back and licking some of the blood off his lip, Link began to unbuckle the straps on his gauntlet to free his wrist.
So, did you see what I did?
One?
Zelda said that before she could stop herself, but she offered him a small smile to show that she wasn't intending to be rude. It seemed to work from the generous grin he returned to her.
Well, yes. But I mean, did you see me attack Coil often?
She thought to Link's quick steps backwards, to the way he rolled off and to get out of the way, his parries and the deflections with his blade and his shield when he'd had it.
No. I suppose you were more on the defensive side of things.
His eyes lit up, and he nodded, still struggling with his gauntlet, clumsy with armored fingers and a heaving chest.
That's going to be you, whenever you end up fighting. Did you watch how often I moved? You won't want to stay still. Always on the balls of your feet. Did you see how I had to get out of the way? How I had to make greater use of my space? That requires stamina. You're going to need far more than offensive strength. Which means more running and training, Princess.
What? Wait. This was just a demonstration for me? I thought you were going to show off your skill.
Frustrated watching him struggle, Zelda pushed his hand away and undid the clasp on his wrist before handing the armor to the knight beside them and moving on to his other hand to do the same.
So, did you rig this fight?
Gods, no.
Link laughed, though it came out as a wheeze from his lack of breath. He usually fought with more controlled restraint than this. He wouldn't throw himself all over the training yard and waste his energy in a real fight. She got the other piece off, and Link rubbed at his free wrist, his hooded eyes intent on hers.
Thank you.
For a moment, she was caught in them, in their sincerity and depth. Distracted, she traced his face with her eyes, noticing the dripping sweat on his skin, the stick to his damp hair, the wild way the other pieces stuck out, his rapid chest movements. She felt her cheeks heat up and moved behind him before he could notice, but Link had also turned his head.
You don't need to do that, Princess.
It's good for muscle memory.
This time, her fingers were fumbling, but she held her breath. The knight attendant pointed at a strap for her to loosen first as she undid the simple buckles.
You got hurt.
Link started to turn again, but she shoved his shoulder forward to remind him not to move.
I did.
He grinned to himself, and it was obvious in his voice.
Who are you worried?
Zelda scoffed.
Yes, for me. You just said that's going to be how I'm supposed to fight. But if I was elbowed in the face, I think I'd have gone down for good.
And here I thought you cared for my well-being.
She pulled the rest of the strap out and tapped his arm to let him know she'd finished.
I'm sorry, Link, but my interests are a little more self-centered in this regard. I'm here to learn how to not die, not how to get hit in the face multiple times.
He pulled the rest of it off and handed it to the knight before turning to her. A larger smile appeared on his face, and it was clear he was fighting back something beyond it.
Thank you. Yes, it's entirely possible that you might get hit, Princess. But better a broken nose than a slit throat. Besides, we'll deal with that when we get there. I just wanted you to see the way you would likely fight. It's not how I fight normally, so if you're concerned for your safety, I promise you, I won't be quite as dodgy. You'll be alright.
She shook her head, but she was shocked to feel a small grin tugging her lip up, amused by his intentionally boastful tone. Had it been just a few weeks before, she'd likely want to throttle him for all his talk of how differently they will inevitably fight and how his was superior. But today? Perhaps it was because she could see the effort he'd made for her. He'd seen her getting frustrated, bored, or annoyed, and tried to change things up, even if it wasn't how he usually did things. Maybe it was simply because she felt more comfortable around him after all this time together.
Okay, fine. Brag about your style. You are good, and I should listen to you in matters relating to fighting. Are you happy?
Immensely.
Don't get used to it. Tomorrow I'll be complaining about you once more.
Today, I'll take in stride then, Princess.
Zelda smirked and started walking away.
Where are you going? We still have to train today.
She turned, walking backwards as she shook her head.
You're sweating and you stink. Go take a bath or something, and I'll see you tomorrow. I'm giving you the rest of today off from running laps with me.
He nodded, accepting her terms.
Bright and early tomorrow, then?
Yes, Master Link.
Zelda laughed with an exaggerated roll of her eyes as she sarcastically bowed to him before skipping away, taking her personal guards with her, leaving Link to watch her go. Coil walked up to Link and crossed his arms, his breathing slightly more controlled now.
Did you enjoy showing off?
Link started to untie his doublet, taking one more look behind him where Zelda had gone.
Maybe a little.
Just be careful, Link. You're playing with fire. That's the Princess of Hyrule. You're to train her, not to woo her.
Pulling at the elastic that attempted to hold his hair back, he shook his hair out and pushed it away from his eyes before retying it.
I'm not wooing her. I just think this will go easier if she doesn't despise me. We spend a lot of time together. It's better for the both of us if we can become friends.
Just face it. You have a boyish crush, and you are hiding it poorly. All I'm saying is to be careful, for your own sake.
Link took one more glance at the archway Zelda had crossed through and sighed, half wishing she'd forgotten something behind so she'd return. But he shook the thought away and worked on dismantling the next piece of his armor instead.
Don't worry. I will.
Thank you for watching the 3rd chapter of The Legend of Zelda: Dance With Me. We hope you enjoyed, and can't wait to release future chapters. If you want to be updated with future releases, make sure to hit that bell and subscribe. And if you want to see videos early, check the link in the description below to find our Patreon. You can also find the link to the original story down there, written on DeiliaMedlini's AO3 account. Again, we appreciate you all for watching. Farewell.
Well, it has been decided, folks. Link won the spar, and Coil lost. But now, more importantly, look at Link's balls. Oh my god, they shine like diamonds. I'm blinded by his balls.